It's always great to be with a bunch of rebels. So thank you for having me on, and be an interesting election. It seems that there's been a lack of interest from what I'm seeing around the countryside. No, I'm not sure if your other guests are seeing the same thing.
How can that be though?
Yeah.
There's such pushback on the policies and the things that the Ford government has done. How can you rationalize that there is this seemingly disinterest from the voters?
Well, we saw the same thing in the last federal election, which I thought was the most critical federal election in our country's history. But we actually had a lower voter turnout last September than previous years. Um, and I think there's a lot of factors that go into play. One, of course, is no political party or is seen to be reflective of a large percentage of Canadians, and people choose just not to be engaged. I think it's also a reflection. Elections and democracy is said to be a reflection of our society, and I think that's very true. We see, I don't know if it's apathy, but there's certainly a lot of people who in Ontario and Canada who don't have any regard for freedom, don't have much regard for their community, see the lens of their lives through their paychecks and not much else. So, we just see a continuing decline in interest in our governance and in our communities.
And Randy, I was saying to Tamara and our guests earlier, I find this election utterly baffling because typically when you have an incumbent government and the economy is, ravaged by inflation, I mean, my goodness, you go to the gas station, you're paying more than $2 a liter. I still can't get that number around my head. You go to a grocery store. I was shopping yesterday, Randy. I figured I've got about $25 worth of groceries in my basket. Turned out it was $86. I would really be a big failure on the Price is Right. The point I'm making with the economy, with the way the healthcare system is, Doug Ford promised to end hallway healthcare. He did not do that. That usually bodes as a disaster for the reigning government, and yet we have these pollsters saying, nope, it's going to be perhaps even a bigger majority. Like I said, Randy, I find it baffling. How do you make sense out of it?
Well, I think a lot of the people that are being impacted and affected by the cost of gasoline, by the outrageous increase in food costs and in housing, they're also the ones who don't see any solutions in the political horizon. I think those are the ones who are most impacted with the failures of our government, who are most likely not to be engaged. The white collar public servant who has not been hurt what one iota through the last 2 years, or the people who have received handsome wage subsidies and rent subsidies and whatnot. They still have benefited from the largesse of government. So I think those are a couple of factors. I think we're seeing that our culture and our society has changed. When I was younger, an economy like this, runaway inflation, would see a great influx and increase in voter turnout. And that's what you need. Every time an incumbent government is removed, just about exclusively, it requires a surge in voters to remove an incumbent government. This one's going to be interesting because I don't believe the polling has captured fully we've seen a number of the polls showing that the minor and upstart and new parties are totaling in about 10 or 12% of the vote. How that is distributed across the province, we're unsure of. But I think there will be a number of pockets, or potentially a number of pockets, where that other vote could spell some trouble for Doug Ford. I don't see him getting more seats than he got last time. He's certainly in governing territory, that's without question. Also due to the abject failure of Andrea Horwath and Steve Del Duke and Mike Schreiner, in failing to provide and articulate any reasonable option or alternative to Ford.
What's happening in your riding, Randy? You've been a stronghold there for, I don't even know how many consecutive years or elections. So what is the feeling like where you are?
Well, it's again, we're seeing a real lack of interest. As you drive around the riding, the number of signs on private property is minuscule. It's hardly noticeable. We have a big field here. We have 8 candidates. We have, all the major parties. We have and then we have the upstart parties, the Populist Party of Ontario being represented with my daughter Chelsea as a candidate, as well as the Derek Sloan's party, the Ontario Party. We also have a couple of independent candidates as well. So I think there's one of the things that you can see. There's an interest and recognition by many people that they have to do something, and they're being engaged and seeing 8 candidates. But the corollary or the flip side of that is a very disengaged and uninterested electorate by and large, from what we're seeing so far.
Again, it's baffling to me, Tamara, given all these factors, and also another factor that we didn't talk about too, Randy, because it keeps coming up whenever we go out to Queen's Park and speak to the anti-lockdown demonstrators, this feeling of betrayal that almost everyone I've ever spoken to, and I say, do you mind me asking how you voted in 2018? And almost 100% the answer is the Doug Ford PCs, and yet they were demonized as a bunch of yahoos by the Premier. He would never come out and meet them. I suspect maybe they don't want to vote for a left of center party like NDP or the Liberals, and maybe they are the ones en masse staying at home.
I think there's an element of truth to that in accuracy, David. There's a nuance in politics that a lot of people don't recognize. But although about 80% of the turnout is loyal turnout, people that will vote for the blue party, the green party, the orange party, those about 80% historically fit into that category, and they're not going to be moved. They'll either stay at home if they're not happy, or get out if they're encouraged. And part of that is this, again, a reflection of society where people want to be on the consensus side or the winning side. So, I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I know that there's probably, my best estimate is there's about 20 to 25% of conservatives who are absolutely outraged and disenchanted with Doug Ford's government. But will they stay at home? Will they go to one of the new upstart parties? Or will this tendency or this desire to be on the winning team bring them out again? I'm not certain, but that is an element that I've seen in my 15 years in elected office, that there is a great number of people who want to make sure that they are on the consensus or the winning side.
And Randy,
And that,
I have heard that, but I don't understand that. I mean, if the polls were indicating that the NDP was headed to a supermajority, I'm not going to say, oh, I want to be on the winning team. No,
Because we're rebels, David.
Oh yeah. Well, not that rebellious, I'll tell you. So I think you're right, and I've heard this theory before, but Randy, for the life of me, I don't understand it.
well, if you can understand what's going on in our country, you're a much better person than I. Yeah. But look at, we've seen, the orange wave or the orange crush with the NDP, where people get on a bandwagon.
Yeah.
We've seen that in various stages during the Mulroney sweeps. This does happen, and the mainstream or legacy parties use this very effectively, and they come up with terms such as vote splitting. Don't vote for the PPC because that will just get Trudeau in. They really reinforce that brand loyalty and be on the winning side. It's a complete distortion, and it's a complete contempt of the design of democracy. You should be voting strictly and only for the best person that most closely resembles your values. That's how the system is designed. Who best represents your values and who you have confidence in, who will be your best advocate. But clearly we know that that is not the way the system is working now. Most people are aligned strictly by a tribal function, just as we see so much of society is polarized. Politics has become exceptionally tribal as well.
Well, Randy, we're going to have to wrap it here. And I appreciate your time. I think the last time I saw you, you were in Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto, and you were in a fight with a megaphone, and you won. So I think you know what I'm talking about. But Randy,
I do.
It's a fascinating election, to be sure. Thank you once again, sir, for your time. Greatly appreciated.
Well, the other important part here, this is the very first election where every ballot will be tabulated by a Dominion voting machine.
Oh, gee.
The first time in our province's history that a provincial general election is not going to have any verification process on the outcome. So stay tuned. I think there'll be more to come after 9 o'clock.
Wow. Where have I heard the name Dominion voting machine before?
Gee, I wonder.
Randy, thank you so much again for your time, sir.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Hey folks, before you know it, September will be here. That's when the Conservatives are going to have their latest leadership convention. Do you want to get your news from the legacy media? I sure don't. And if you like the coverage we're bringing you, please go to leadershipreports.ca. That's leadershipreports.ca. And if you can chip in $1 or $3 to cover our expenses, we would greatly appreciate that.